As promised, big changes are coming. The models are getting excited. Get ready. I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, December 10th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
Be sure and like and subscribe. Ring the bell. You get automatic notifications when the videos are posted, typically on Sunday evenings. To subscribe, just click the little Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And if you'd like to make a contribution to the cause, you can. Just hit the special thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. Our Predicament, thank you. Evolution Moto, Rib Blackmore, Chris 808, Mont the Drifter. And then Mud Ride for All. Thank you for your generous contribution, and a special thanks to Charles Folks with a very large contribution. We appreciate it very much. We're actually going to use the money to try to get a new camera, upgrade some of our equipment, and the new server is on its way, so we are making progress here. Hope you are too. All right, with that, let's get to work. We'll start by looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. We see a gale over the dateline producing 26-foot seas aimed pretty well at the Hawaiian Islands, and that thing actually has been pushing off the Kuril Islands for a bit and is going to continue off to the east for a bit longer. So, swell is on the way. But first off, let's take a look at current conditions. We're going to start in Northern California looking at the buoys. Point Reyes buoy, number 029. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting that buoy all the way up at 33.3 second period, super long period energy, which there is none, the whole way down to 5 second period. That's just pure wind chop, not even really surfable. See a little bump out here at 11 seconds and 9 seconds. Putting that all together, you sort of integrate all the area under the curve to tease out specific swells. Primary swell, 2.9 feet at 12.3 seconds from 288 degrees. That surf at about 3.5 feet. Ocean Beach was, waist high, maybe some chest high set sort of thing today. So there is some waves. Then we go down to the south end of the state, down off of San Diego, Point Loma South buoy, number 191. We see the same profile, but much smaller in size across the spectrum. That's all attributable to the Channel Islands pretty much blocking the swell. Anyway, same sort of pops at 11 and maybe 9 or 10 seconds, something like that. Primary swell, 2 feet at 10.4 seconds from 277 degrees. Surf, 2 foot. Yeah, that's about right. Maybe waist high at some top spots. Then we go out to Hawaii, the North Shore of Oahu, Waimea Bay, buoy number 106. We see a little bit better profile, more energy there with a peak at 13 seconds, another at 11, and a bunch of wind swell all mixed in. Primary swell, 3.9 feet at 13.1 seconds from 350 degrees. That's surf at about 5 feet. And actually, if you looked at this stuff earlier today, the profile was a bit higher. The size was a bit higher, and it was, maybe 2 feet overhead at top spots, something like that. So Hawaii is the spot to be for the moment. So let's go back in time. This is significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. We're going back to Wednesday night, 0Z Thursday, the 7th of December. Little gale developed here north of Hawaii. We'll put that in motion. And you see, there we go, 23-foot seas right here. These are the highest seas over this entire domain. They're indicated with the plus sign. You see a little plus sign right there. And the X is the highest winds. That's probably buried in there somewhere. Max winds at 42.6 knots. So all that aimed pretty much at Hawaii on Thursday morning, sort of held into maybe Thursday night and Friday and then faded out. You can see the leading edge of that swell impacted the Hawaiian Islands on Saturday morning, and as of Sunday, let's see, we're right about there, it was fading out. So looking forward, we're going to start up at the jet stream level. The jet stream is what drives everything, and this is important because the tease that I'm talking about in the intro to the video, it's all going to be about the jet stream, and we're going to talk about that much later in the video towards the end. But everything that we're going to talk about jet stream related at the end is all supported by the information that we're going to be presenting over the next 45 minutes or so. So it's worth paying attention. All right, but we're looking at the Jetstream forecast for just the next week. These are Jetstream level winds up about 30,000 feet. They help support the formation of gales when those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet, and you kind of see sort of a dip right there. The jet is actually pushing off Japan, not even consolidated. It's kind of split. You see sort of two lobes there. One of them peels off to the north, then falls south. The other tracks to the east on the 30 north latitude line. But right in here, there's a little bit of a dip that helps create a counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure. And of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds. Winds, if they're strong enough, get traction on the ocean surface, and they start creating seas, raw sea state. Those seas, if they persist long enough, eventually start radiating away from the fetch area. They get groomed out. The lesser period energy elements fall off, and you end up with swell. And of course, swell, when it hits your beach, makes surf. Right, so we have a little mini trough here somewhere near the date line. We saw from the significant wave height chart that there is something going on in this area producing seas, so it all seems to fit together pretty well. So we move into Monday. The trough pushes off to the east. The jet stream actually builds a little bit here with 130 to almost 140 knot winds, but lifting off. But then notice, here's that split jet stream flow, but the northern branch starts falling south, carving out yet another trough in the Gulf of Alaska, getting reasonably well organized as we get into Friday the 13th of December, supportive of gale development. Notice the split, the jet is split here off of California. That's likely just going to continue to support nice weather in this area, with the full jet just plowing into, well, this is Vancouver Island, more atmospheric river there. New trough, still digging out, or actually it's the same trough, just getting pinched as it moves through the Gulf of Alaska, digging deeper off of central California, still in some degree supporting gale development. Notice that split just barely hanging on to California. You're going, where's our rain? Where's our snow? Never fear, it will be here soon enough. As we get into Friday, that cut-off trough pretty much, not quite cut off because the whole jet stream is flowing through it, continues into Saturday. But then here we go on Saturday afternoon. You can see the jet just getting ready to cut off. But also sort of look out here in the west. And this speaks again to these long-term changes that are coming. The jet starts looking significantly better, consolidated, pushing off to the east. Now still kind of a mess over the I'll call it the eastern half of the North Pacific, but we suspect that is going to change mightily as time goes on. All right, so let's go take a look down at the ocean surface. Surface level pressure and surface level winds. You cannot have surf if you do not have winds, so the winds are very interesting. The jet stream supports the upper level development of gales, but the gales actually have to form at the surface. We know there's a bit of a trough here, and here is our gale with 30, 35, almost maybe 40 knot winds in a couple little areas there. Pushing from the northwest, targeting Hawaii pretty well. That's as of Sunday. So we get into Monday, the gale sweeps off to the east, still with 35 to 40 knot winds, then builds as it gets into the Gulf of Alaska, some on Tuesday with 45 knot winds, but also lifting off to the north pretty quick. But the good news is right behind that, Tuesday night, here comes another gale with 35 to 40 knot winds, sort of sideways, or call it sideband energy, targeting the Hawaiian Islands. Also notice strong winds here over the Hawaiian Islands. We'll get into that in a minute. But more swell potential for maybe the U.S. West Coast from this one, nothing huge. And that gale fades off. And then you get the sense of a much broader storm complex trying to organize off of Kamchatka as we get into Friday, 15th of December, but not to be undone. We know there's still a trough here off the U.S. West Coast. Sure enough, little gale develops from it with 35 to 40 knot winds. Notice it's almost pushing some energy back at Hawaii, but also at the U.S. West Coast as we get into Saturday and Sunday. It finally fades out, and there we are a week from now with something trying to push off the Kuril Islands. What is the effect of those winds on the ocean surface? Well, we already know there's 26-foot seas out here over the dateline aimed at Hawaii. Those seas fade to 23.7 feet as we get into Monday morning, pushing off to the east, some sort of 23-foot seas, targeting the U.S. West Coast into maybe Tuesday night. That's good for maybe small 13-second period swell for the U.S. West Coast. And some energy, you see it right here, pushing into the Hawaiian Islands on Wednesday. Another gale tries to build right behind that, as we suspected, producing 20-foot seas, nothing really too interesting. Then the cutoff low forms off of California. It actually looks better this evening than it did this morning with 26-foot seas, but they're all kind of aimed south. As we get into maybe Saturday, they take better aim at, we'll say, central, from San Francisco southward into Southern California, rotating off the coast, maybe some sideband energy for the Hawaiian Islands, and then we're out a week, and we're still waiting for something solid to happen. All right, local wind forecast. California there, that's Point Conception, Southern California down there, North California here, Central California. I use San Francisco as the dividing line between Central California and North California, but it actually is probably a little bit different depending on your choice. Hawaii right here. All right, so Sunday we had a light wind pattern, maybe light north winds for the offshore waters of California, and trades about 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Monday, a little bit building northwest wind pattern along the U.S. West Coast. High pressure off here driving that with, well, we'll say 15 to 20 knot northwest winds, mainly off the coast, near shore less. Light trades for the Hawaiian Islands. Again, Tuesday, northwest wind pattern builds as high pressure sets up along the north and central California coast. 15, let's say 10 knots near shore, 15 knots off the coast. Light wind regime trades for the Hawaiian Islands, but you can see high pressure building here and strong northwest winds just about ready to impact Kauai. So we get into Wednesday. The wind pattern finally fades for California. Northwest winds, probably 5 knots near shore, but here comes the 20-knot winds pushing into almost the Hawaiian Islands. There we go. And as Thursday, light winds for California. Remember, the jet is split right here. A little bubble of protection for California. Full north east wind onslaught for the Hawaiian Islands at 20 to 25 knots. Driven by high pressure, 1030 millibar high north of the islands. Friday, a southeast wind regime, pretty light, 5 knots for California. Cutoff low off the coast. Wind still pretty brisk for the Hawaiian Islands, 20 knots out of the east-northeast. So we get into Saturday, low pressure hanging off the California coast, producing mostly an offshore flow for California. A lighter trade wind regime sets up for the Hawaiian Islands. And as of Sunday, light offshore winds for California and trades east-northeast at 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. So not too bad for California, but Hawaii certainly has a wind event to deal with. Precip and snow potential for the next week. Now, California right here, that's all we're really focusing on. The blues and shades of blue are rain. The whites and the yellows are snow. And Northern California, there's the California-Oregon border right there. So a little bit of rain for Cape Mendocino early Monday. It all fades out. I'm going pretty fast here because I know what the outcome already is. You see the cutoff low off the coast. You go, here comes our rain, here comes our rain. Whoops, we're a week out and it still hasn't made it on shore. And I don't believe anything more than a week out. Snow forecast dashboard, we're looking at Palisades, Tahoe, formerly Squaw Valley. For the next week, virtually nothing. But you see the T's on the models once you get to about December 18th, a building snow pattern. We're not even going to go look at all the other resorts because it's just not worth it this far out. The models jump all around. But it gives you a sense that maybe something is going to come starting about the 18th. Looking at snow levels, right? This is the base of Palisades, Tahoe at 6,200 8,500 feet. That's the parking lot there. Up at 9,000 feet. And this is probably pretty good for anywhere in the Tahoe area, in the Tahoe Basin. The freeze line is right the separation between this gray and this white here. That's the 32-degree line. So the freeze level coming down to about 8,500 feet as we get into Monday and Tuesday, and then it warms up again with the freeze level up at 10.5, pushing to nearly 12,000 feet through the 15th, and then starting to fade in the 16th. And then once you get down to about the 18th, where we saw that snow forecast falling, you see snow level eventually making it the whole way down to the surface or down to the parking lot at Palisades, with the snow level down at 5,000 feet. So hope beyond if you believe the models. All right, surf spot forecast for Northern California. We're kind of wrapping up the surf part of the discussion here. We see as we get into Monday a decreasing swell size or surf size from 4 feet dropping to like 1.5 feet or something. Then Thursday, some swell starts finally arriving from a gale that pushed through the Gulf. Theoretically 9 feet, that's probably pushing it on the high side, more like 6 or 7 feet sort of thing. And then some more energy beyond that. Driving down, looking at the actual swell heights, well, we see, as we get into Monday, 4 feet at 10 or 11 seconds. A bunch of wind swell, look at that, 6-7 second period junk as we get into Tuesday, Wednesday, all driven by winds just off the coast. But then as we get into Thursday, we see a building swell of maybe 5 pushing 6 feet at 12 to 13 seconds sort of thing. And then another little pulse of something out over the weekend, 6 or 7 feet at 10 seconds. So nothing huge, nothing long period, but it looks like rideable surf is forecast as we get into the latter part of the work week. Going into Southern California, San Diego, well, the issue of the Channel Islands and the swell angle being too north and all that, you can just see very small swell heights till we maybe get into Friday, into the weekend. Let's take a look at the details on that. Yeah, 2 feet, same swell that's hitting Northern California, but filtered 2 feet at 15 seconds sort of thing, and then maybe another little pulse as we get into Sunday of 4 feet at 13 seconds, sneaking in through the Channel Islands. But Oahu is where the action is right now. You can see our decreasing swell, but another bout of swell supposedly building as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday. But when you see these big dropouts in swell size, that means there's a bunch of wind swell mixed in too. And it'll probably be pretty much of an ugly mess the whole way through into the weekend before things settle down. You can actually look, oh, here's the wind speeds here, 25 knots, 27, 24, pretty much hard. And there are northeast winds to east-northeast, things finally settling down as we get into Saturday. Swell sizes, well, we get a nice swell starting on Tuesday, building to maybe 6 feet at 14 seconds. Then the wind starts nuking. There's a whole bunch of junk mixed in. So it's really hard to even trust these swell sizes. And then we get later in the week, 6 feet at 11 seconds and fading from there. And now for the long-term outlook. We're looking at the two major oscillations that affect weather long-term, the forcing factors, the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and the El Nino Southern Oscillation, ENSO. And actually, I was reading a post from Daniel Swain. He's a PhD in meteorology. He has his own channel and does YouTube discussions on a site. I think it's called Weather West. But he was talking about, and I get these comments from time to time about people talking about the North Atlantic Oscillation, other various oscillations that are not MJO related. And he actually addressed it recently and said, the short of it was, he said, those are more like, they're not forcing factors. Those are more the results of the MJO and El Nino and other larger factors at play. They are indices that indicate kind of what's going on, but they in and of themselves don't force weather to happen. They are the results of other forcing factors. All right. And with that then, so we'll look at the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. It has two phases, an active phase and an inactive phase. It rotates around the planet from west to east on the equator. The active phase on one side of the planet, the inactive phase on the other. They rotate west-east around the planet on the equator. There are two phases, the active phase being like a low-pressure system the inactive phase being a high-pressure system. When the active phase moves over the West Pacific, or basically anywhere over the planet, because it is a low-pressure system, it takes warm, moist water in the far West Pacific and sucks it off, and that warm, moist air gets sucked into the jet stream, fuels the jet stream, strengthens the jet stream. A stronger jet stream typically produces stronger storms, which produce surf. They also produce weather and rain when the active phase of the MJO starts moving towards California, from west to east on the equator. The other thing that the active phase of the MJO does is it reduces trade winds. Because it's a low pressure system and trades are generated by high pressure, okay? When the low pressure moves in, associated with the active phase of the MJO, it sort of cuts the high out, the trades relax. That allows warm water that's normally sequestered up in the far West Pacific to start sloshing east, but that warm water doesn't actually move on the equator from west to east. It goes underneath the equator, follows the thermocline, and produces a thing called a Kelvin wave, basically a ball of warm water. But the point is, if you get successive active phases of the MJO, they can create successive Kelvin waves. And that is how you get El Nino. All that warm water eventually starts pooling up. It erupts when it hits the Galapagos Islands and off of Ecuador. It erupts from under the ocean surface up to the ocean surface. And then all the water, all that warm water, if you have successive Kelvin waves, starts piling up in the East Pacific. Rather than being piled up in the West Pacific, it's a wholesale mover of warm water from west to east. And when that happens, warm water starts evaporating in the East Pacific. That starts fueling the jet stream. It starts changing the jet stream, and that is how you get El Nino. All right, so we're looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO. We're looking at data from the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys that were set up in the early 80s after the major El Nino of 82, 83. The scientists and National Weather Service go, we need better visibility on El Nino because it affects the weather around the planet. It's not just U.S. A bunch of countries all have contributed to this project. So the buoys, here's the equator. This is the East Pacific here, the West Pacific here. That's the equator. There's New Guinea there, the date line right there. The buoys have wind speed sensors on them. So we're just looking at the arrows. We can see trades blowing pretty hard out of the east over the East Pacific, pretty hard out of the east over the Central Pacific, and then maybe slackening a little bit here in the West Pacific, but you also see big data blockages here. There's a whole program to go upgrade the buoys, and that's happening now, and all these blockages theoretically will disappear. Now, it's not the actual wind speeds that matter. It's the anomaly, the difference from normal. All it takes is the trades slackening for 2 weeks in the West Pacific, and that'll set up a Kelvin wave, okay? And so we're looking at these arrows here to see, well, is there any difference in the east-west component of the wind? The north-south component doesn't matter. We see a little bit of stronger than normal easterly winds right here near the Galapagos, but otherwise pretty much neutral until you get here in the west to the date line right there, and we see a couple of arrows of westerly anomalies suggesting, well, maybe trades are weaker than normal here. Maybe the active phase of the MJO or just some piece of it is starting to happen. We need to dig a little deeper and find out. This is 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies, okay, this is the whole planet, South America there, Central America there, New Guinea there, the equator right there, dateline right here. This is just for the past 5 days. The oranges and reds are westerly anomalies, the blues easterly anomalies. So we see westerly anomalies, and it's only on the equator, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. That's all that matters. See westerly anomalies over the East Pacific, but in the all-important, I call it the Kelvin wave generation area, the West Pacific, this is where westerly anomalies really do their magic in terms of imparting energy to the jet stream and creating Kelvin waves. Well, we see blues here, which means easterly anomalies. Kelvin wave generation area, in fact, there's the equator right there, 5 degrees north and south of the equator from about the date line, 170 west, to as far in the West Pacific as you can get, about 125 west. So on the 4th of December, easterly anomalies. On the 5th, a little pocket here down off of New Guinea, but nothing too important. Maybe a little bit building westerly pattern on the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th, but no wholesale strong westerly wind events yet. So what's the forecast for the next 2 weeks? All right, so this is the east-west component of the wind. Same thing, 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies for the whole planet, right? All we care about is the West Pacific. There's the date line right there. So that's a good, that's the start of the Kelvin wave generation area. Far West Pacific ends about 125 east, so right there. So the oranges and reds are westerly anomalies, so we can look back in November. Major westerly wind burst event, active phase of the MJO right here. Then you see we got easterly anomalies. They actually barely made it to the date line and weren't that horrible. They've already pretty much dissipated, and we see a building westerly wind event. So right here is the cutoff. So it's this area right in here. Building westerly anomalies starting today on through the next 2 weeks per the GFS model. Now, not forecast as strong as what the model said, what was that, a week ago, last week's video? It looked like, here comes the bomb. Not as strong now, but still, not easterly winds. We'll take it. And then here's another model. This is a statistic model. This is showing cloud cover. And why do we care about cloud cover? Well, low pressure is effectively that creates clouds, right? So if you have more clouds, one can assume roughly that that might be associated with the active phase of the MJO. So South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea right there, the equator right there. The date line right there, Kelvin wave generation area right in here. So outgoing long wave radiation suggests more clouds, less sunlight reflecting off the ocean surface. Looks like the active phase of the MJO is trying to make a four-way into the West Pacific as of today. Continuing 5 days from now, continuing 10 days from now, continuing 15 days from now. That per the statistic model. The dynamic model, not quite so optimistic, saying the active phase may be kind of lingering into about 10 days from now and then going neutral. We'll dig in a little deeper. The same two models, statistic model here, the dynamic model here, the GEFS model. So this shows you where the active phase actually is and how strong it is. The active phase moves from west to east, from the Indian Ocean to the Maritime Continent, over the West Pacific, over the East Pacific, under the United States. Remember, this is just on the equator. Across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot is where the active phase is, so in the East Maritime Continent, just about ready to enter the West Pacific. The circle here is like the cone of death. If the dot is near the circle or in it, it is considered extremely weak. You really want the dot to be out here somewhere, but right now, this is where it is. The forecast track for three different members of the statistic model suggest it moving somewhere into the West Pacific and varying between moderate strength to extremely weak. The dynamic model has it working its way into the West Pacific and just sort of noodling around there, but inside the circle of death and extremely weak. And then here is another version of outgoing long wave radiation, upper level moisture. The greens are wet areas, the oranges and reds, dry areas. The green would typically be associated with the active phase of the MJO and low pressure. This goes out 40 days. South America there, Central America, New Guinea there, the equator there, dateline roughly right there. And this runs about a week ahead of what's going on down at the surface. So you see strong active signals suggested today, continuing making its way across and out of the Kelvin wave generation area by about Christmas morning. But remember that this runs about a week ahead of what's really going on. So the whole month of December looks like a big red X in terms of the active phase of the MJO over the Pacific. Then as we get into January, inactive phase sets up, but by about the middle of January 14th, here comes the active phase again. So a relatively promising outlook. All right, then a different model, the CFS model. This goes out a month. All right, here is past performance. Here's the forecast down here. The date line runs right up the middle. far west Pacific, 125 east, so right there. So you can see, oh, and this would be like the maritime continent. The blues are easterly anomalies, the reds westerly anomalies. And this chart also has the active and inactive phase of the MJO, the black contour. So we'll get into that. You can see here in the maritime continent, just nuking east winds, in the Pacific, nuking west winds, with the inactive phase here in October. This is back in like Halloween. Strong active phase that happened in pretty much the whole good part of the month of November with nuking west winds, likely building another Kelvin wave. We've been through the inactive phase since about Thanksgiving, and as of right now, it's all but gone. There's our easterly anomalies that have all but dissipated. From here on out, looks like active phase for the whole next month with westerly anomalies pretty strong on the date line almost through Christmas, backing off a little and then returning. But you see this west wind, east wind pattern. What's that all about? Well, that's really about the Walker circulation. We've talked about this in the past. That is about rising and falling air in the Pacific. But to make this story short, you can see this split. But what's happening is air is falling down from up in the atmosphere, hitting the surface and splitting and going out in either direction. The center of that split is in the far west Pacific right now at 125 east. That's driving the westerly anomalies across the Pacific and dry. So this is dry air falling here, creating easterly anomalies over the maritime continent. They're in a drought sort of situation, whereas we are thinking we are moving towards a much more favorable pattern with all this westerly anomaly pushing warm water. I mean, this has been going on since January at the beginning of this year, and still more active phases of the MJO and more westerly anomalies in control. A quick look at outgoing long wave radiation, that's cloud cover. The blues, cloudy skies, the oranges and reds, dry air. The date line, this is the whole plan on one chart. The date line runs right up the middle, far west Pacific, 125 west right here. So you can see last year, this goes back a year. Last year it was wet air over the maritime continent, bone dry air over the date line, classic La Nina sort of signal. You see as we got into the summer, this wet air, the trend started building, and now it's building over the date line, and it's all dry air over the maritime continent. So we go from La Nina to El Nino. These are actuals. This is not a forecast. That's what's actually happening the last day of the models right here through December 6th. So then we go look at the forecast. This is the CFS model. This goes out 3 months. Past performance down here, the forecast up here. Date line runs right up the middle here. Outgoing long wave radiation. The blues mean cloudy skies, the oranges and yellows, dry air. Same pattern. See the building dry air pattern over the maritime continent, the building wet air pattern over the date line. Forecast looking forward, dark blues, very wet air over the date line. Also notice it's starting to slide off to the east some. This is classic El Nino sort of thing. It starts setting up somewhere west of the date line and then works its way east across the Pacific. But also notice east anomalies as we get into January start working their way into the Kelvin wave generation area. A little bit on February, then they back off. We'll see. I think it's going to keep going and the whole pattern shifting off to the east. All right, now let's go from there to 850 millibar winds. What's happening down at the surface? All right, same sort of deal. Here's the building. The oranges are westerly winds. The building active phase of the MJO pattern. Here's our little east anomaly break. Building westerly anomalies the whole month of December into January, solid into the beginning of February, then a little bit of break, and then more westerly anomalies beyond that. Also notice the dry air easterly pattern that's been in place over the maritime continent is supposed to start moving almost 50% of the Kelvin wave generation area as we get into February. This sort of signals or is the hints of the end of El Nino. It's not really the end at that point, but just the beginnings of the end of it. Let's overlay the MJ. And also notice the strength of these westerly anomalies here in January and in December. Looking pretty solid. We'll overlay the MJO. Not unexpected here. The red contour is the active phase of the MJO. We're just looking forward. Here's our inactive phase that's currently over the Pacific and fading. But you see already westerly anomalies forecast building. I mean, they're literally showing starting today and from here all the way through to almost the end of January. Solid westerly anomalies associated with the active phase of the MJO. A little bit of an inactive phase as we get from, we'll say, mid-January into mid-February, and then another big bullseye beyond that. Also notice, so California is about 120 west. When the active phases of the MJO move over, or actually they're moving south of California, this is all on the equator, that's when you be your big red X for rain and snow events. So it certainly looks like come Christmas, the whole way through to the end of January, a bit of a dry out, and then as we get later in February on into March, potential wetness. Overlay the low pass filter. This is the El Nino La Nina signal, if you will. The black contour here, that is the low pressure bias. Again, we talked about rising air over the date line and westerly anomalies and cloud cover. This is what's happening at the surface, more or less. A rough approximation of a building low pressure pattern over the date line, moving a bit east of the date line with 1, 2, 3, 4 contours in place, expected to hold into the end of February, and then moderating some from there. Also notice the high pressure bias. You see last year in actually a couple of, where are we? Yeah, August. The high pressure bias, the last bits of La Nina were hanging over California at 120 west in the inland desert areas. Then you notice, boom, it switched, set up over the maritime continent, expected to hold there for the foreseeable future. February is foreseeable enough, and even the little bit that shows up here, 60 west, that's out over the Atlantic somewhere. California and the Pacific Ocean fully locked in low pressure, exactly what you would expect during a building El Nino. All right, enough about the MJO. What's happening in the ocean? This is the El Nino part of the discussion. The first part of this is subsurface ocean temperatures. All right, West Pacific here, East Pacific here. We've been talking about Kelvin waves in the active phase of the MJO, driving westerly anomalies that take warm water in the West Pacific and push it east. So this is data, again, from the TAO buoy array, that series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino. See the X's here? These are the anchor lines on those buoys. The X's are actual individual sensors strung down the anchor line. They collect data, and then you use a model to fill in the gaps in between to get a profile of what subsurface temperatures are doing. Now, the actual temperatures, they matter, but they're not as important as the anomalies. But we're going to look at the actual temperatures. 30 degrees centigrade, that's very warm water. It's actually moving a little bit off to the east here. I think it was at 164 last week. It's at 163. Not that that movement means a whole lot. It just says there's a giant ball of warm water that's been steadily working its way off to the east. 29 degree isotherm. It too, I think, was at 160. 154 last week. It's about 153 this week. The 28 degree isotherm is moving from 140 to about 137, but the lower part of it is almost to 130. And then the 24 degree isotherm, it's actually gotten deeper the past month or two, down to about, I'd say 40 meters. That's the 50 meter mark. And this is roughly off of Ecuador. But it is not the actual water temperatures. It's the anomalies, the difference from normal for this time of year. All right, and you can clearly see a picture here, and it is a very different picture than last week. But let's talk about this. Warm water, all in control. We talked about Kelvin waves. This is the result. You can actually see Kelvin waves, but there's been so many of them, it's just turned into this giant ocean or blob of warm water going from Ecuador the whole way out. Where's the date line here? The date line's right there, going even past the date line out into the almost as far as you can get in the West Pacific, warm water streaming off. Now, there was a separate ball of 4 to 5 degree anomalies. That's centigrade. That's what, roughly 9 degrees Fahrenheit right here. But you notice it's disappeared and it's kind of started to merge in with this pre-existing large blob here. Not unexpected. So we had Kelvin waves 7 and 8 hanging out here. That warm water from that is folding in or building in, backfilling the El Nino warm pool in the far East Pacific. All this water is pushing off to the east. There's a lot of momentum with this Kelvin wave that was out here. It's going to take all this water, force it to the surface. The trades will grab it, start dragging it east across the equator in the Pacific, and that's what will feed our still building El Nino. Now here's data from a different source. This is created not using buoys, but using satellite info. We'll get into that in a minute. This is from the 4th of December, but you see two distinct lobes of warm water where the image above showed one big one. These buoys are pretty much, they're a 5-day average, but they're pretty much real time, whereas this, I think, is lagging a bit behind. But you can see previous warm pool here off Ecuador, Kelvin wave number 7 and 8 all combined, very warm, 5-degree anomalies encased in them, and the leading edge somewhere here around 125 west. We're waiting for the eruption of this Kelvin wave. We think that's behind where this one suggests they've all merged together, and it shows the eruption to the surface going from a point south of California the whole way into Ecuador. This shows that sort of thing too, but just a little bit delayed. And then here's the satellite data. This is sea surface height. Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Central America, equator there, date line there. This is all, if you have warm water at depth, down 200 meters, and a big pool of it, it's going to, it expands because it's warm, and it displaces the water above it to the surface, creating a bump on the ocean surface. So this is satellite data. You just strip out the wave heights, the wind waves, even the tides. You see there's this massive pool from the date line the whole way into Ecuador, 5 degrees north and south of the equator of warmer than normal, or at least higher than normal sea heights, 5-10 centimeters above normal, all eventually going to discharge to the surface. So this is just supporting data to suggest that, yes, there is still probably 2.5 months worth of warm water all embedded here under the equator in the East Pacific. Upper ocean heat anomalies. All right, this literally, you can see historically the path of Kelvin waves across the Pacific. West Pacific here, East Pacific here. This is back December last year. Cold water off of Ecuador, La Nina still in control, but there was an active phase of the MJO. Right in December, you can see a little bit of warm water. That's Kelvin wave number 1. Number 2, across the Pacific, warm water from the West Pacific pushing east. Okay, Kelvin wave number 3 here in March, all associated with individual active phases, the MJO. Number 4 in April, number 5 in May, number 6 in July, number 7, and there's actually an 8th one buried in there from the November westerly wind burst. And you can see all the warm water that was in the West Pacific is now in the East Pacific. All the cold water that was in the East Pacific is now in the West Pacific. This is the classic transition. I mean, if you want to save an image, this is the image you want to save, from La Nina to El Nino. Also notice this last Kelvin wave here, the leading edge of it is right here at 95 west. That's probably just 2 weeks away from erupting, if it's going to make it the whole way into Ecuador. But there is some thought that maybe it'll just start erupting right in this area somewhere, gurgling up to the surface, because trades are blowing a little bit here off of Ecuador. And maybe the eruption point, still east-based, but just not right up along the coast like what was happening back here in April, May, and June. Sort of the line moves out this way. All right, so let's go take a look at what's going on at the surface. We've talked about erupting Kelvin waves and Kelvin waves traversing the Pacific. Well, so here we go. This is sea surface temperature anomalies, and we're really focused in on the equator. There's Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Galapagos right there, Central America, Hawaii out here. The equator is right here. You see the images don't completely overlap. But you see warmer than normal water completely covering the equator, just 5 degrees north and south of the equator. We do notice this week a couple of building warm pockets right out in here. We think this is really the core of the eruption point for Kelvin waves 7 and 8. It's going to be somewhere between about 100 and 120 west. You see pockets there. And then you see steady warming solid out to 135, 140, a little bit of a break, and then some more warming out here. These are anomalies, not actual water temperatures. We're going to get into that in a minute, but this is basically, be it to say, this is the classic El Nino kind of signal. The sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. So we had cooling off of Ecuador here associated with the inactive phase of the MJO. We think that's starting to fade now. You see warming building off of Ecuador and a very weak warming signal out here along the equator. I think mainly attributable to fading trades in this area, allowing warm water that's present and coming up from underneath to start to manifest itself on the surface. And then again, the consolidated sea surface temperature anomaly pattern, clear El Nino signal if there ever was one, filling the entire Pacific from the date line on east. Classic kind of El Nino look. Sea surface temperature trend in the Nino 1.2 region area. This is the area right on the equator there by Ecuador and the Galapagos. Temperatures trending down. You could see it on the image. Well, actually up a little bit today at 0.97 degrees above normal. So not as high as they were. They were up in the 3+ degree range there when the first set of Kelvin waves started arriving back in, what was that, April or so. Trending down, this makes us believe the eruption point is moving more away from Ecuador and just out off the coast a little bit. And then we look at the Nino 3.4 index. This is the official El Nino monitoring region. That region, in fact, let's go look. The Nino 1.2 region is right in here. The Nino 3.4 region is from south of California, 120 west out to 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. You can clearly see a warm signal filling that area. And the trend in that index is heading upward. Today, plus 1.534 degrees above normal. All right, and you can see it was down at 1 degree, just a barely above 1 degree in September. So let's get oriented here. 0 is neutral. Neutral is up to 0.5 degree above or below the 0 line. If you have warming temperatures for 3 consecutive months at 0.5 degree to 1 degree above normal, that's considered a weak El Nino. From 1 degree to 1.5 degrees, that's considered a moderate El Nino. From 1.5 degrees to 2 degrees, that's considered a strong El Nino. Now this index shows that we're barely in the strong El Nino threshold, but these numbers are actually low. It's really at least 1.7, if not 1.8 above normal. But this chart is good to just give you a rough idea, real time, of what the trend is. All right, so here's a chart of sea surface temperature anomalies for the past year. You can see the building warm pool. Last week we talked a bit about this right here. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 contours, orange. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 1.5 to 2 degree anomalies filling all the Nino regions. That is puts you at strong El Nino status. And these here, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 degrees and above is super El Nino status. Maybe, just maybe, we're right on the threshold of being there. So here is, I know it's a bunch of numbers, but here is the weekly data, I think this is the official weekly data used to compute. Now remember, you have to have sea surface temperatures above, to be super status, you have to be above 2 degrees above normal for 3 consecutive months. But here's the data weekly. This is Nino 1, 2, Nino 3, Nino 4, Nino 3.4 right here. I think it was last week we were at plus 2.1 degrees. Then we got some easterly anomalies, and it knocked it down to 2.0. But still, both these are in super El Nino status. But that's only 2 weeks worth of data. It takes 3 months of 2 degrees or better to get you officially declared a super El Nino. But it's still November. Now also consider, in the previous images, we looked at how much warm water is backed up off of Ecuador, and we said just eyeballing it, probably another 2.5 months worth, okay? And there's more westerly anomalies and maybe potentially more Kelvin wave development forecast. So you begin to wonder, where is this El Nino going and how strong is it going to get? So here is the centered monthly data for the Nino 3.4 region right here. So you can see in September we're at 1.6. That's for the whole month. For the month of October, plus 1.72. Those are both in strong El Nino category. And then in November, here we go, 2.02, strong El Nino status. And again, consider how much warm water is still backed up, another 2 months worth. It seems entirely possible that this El Nino, better than what we ever forecast, could actually reach maybe minimal super El Nino status, at a minimum, solid strong El Nino. And then here is the 3-month average. Now remember, we're going back to April, May, June, 0.48 degree above normal. But see as we get in July, 1.32, August, September, and October, 1.5. So even for the base period, August, September, and October, we were already in strong El Nino status. September, October, November, plus 1.78, right in the middle of the strong status. And really, we've got November. Let's go back. There's November at 2. So if you really take those 3 months there, that's how you get to the 1.78 figure. And we suspect we're only going to get warmer from there. This is actually a very good sign. So what's going on at the ocean surface in terms of currents and temperatures? All right, so typically what you want to see, the normal current across the Pacific runs from east to west, driven by high pressure and trade winds. But you see a complete reversal of that pattern right now. Hopefully on YouTube you can see the streamlines moving from west to east. And that pattern is now making it, well, way out to, at a minimum, to here, and you can't see it, but that's 167 west. We'll drag that more, okay, and wait for it to refresh. Now you see the easterly pattern kind of hanging, going to maybe about there and ending there. This is a significant eastward shift in the confluence point between the westerly current and the easterly current, right now at 154, due south of Hawaii. All right, so now what we're looking at is sea surface temperature anomalies, difference from normal for this time of year. And remember, the Nino regions, all that matters is half a degree. So that's 5 degrees north, that's 5 degrees south. And where is 120? Starting probably right there. Yep. Out to about 170 west, which is right there. So this box right in here is what we're interested in. I can just, you can't, maybe I can actually drag, well, I can't, I'd have to make it smaller, but I'll just read you. I'm just randomly looking. This says 2.8 degrees centigrade above normal, 2.7, 2.1, 1.8. Here's a cold spot here. We'll pick that. 1.6, 2.4, 2.2 degrees above normal. And then we go way out here. 3 degrees above normal, 3.2 degrees above normal, 2.5 degrees above normal. Okay, you get the general idea. There's some very warm pockets and a couple of cooler pockets in here, and all this warm water's going this way, and all this warm water's going this way. They're going to collide somewhere in here, right smack in the middle of the Nino 3.4 region in the next month and a half is our guess. All right, now we're going to do yet one other thing. We're going to look at actual sea surface temperatures. All right, so you see we have warm anomalies in here, and you know, I could get into reading all the data, but the point being, look at this massive blob of warm water. The leading edge of it looks like it's right about there. That is 160 west. I think last time we did this, it was out at like 175, and this was only maybe 2 weeks ago, but we've had massive westerly wind anomalies, a lot of movement, continued westerly anomalies. This pocket of warm water is moving off to the east. It's going to set up somewhere in here, somewhere probably in the next month or so, and drive those sea surface temperatures. Let's see if we can do that again, right over in here, drive the sea surface temp, the 3-month trend currently at 1.78, much higher. This is looking very, very interesting and very hopeful, especially as we get into, I'm thinking somewhere in the middle of January, middle to late January, we're really going to peak out at all this thing. So it's going to be interesting to see what magic number we come to. All right, so next up, what's the atmosphere think is going on? All right, we look at the Southern Oscillation Index, the difference between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Tahiti in the Pacific, Darwin over the maritime continent. If pressure is lower in Tahiti, the daily index goes negative. Hey, we're looking good, minus 20.66. Now, we haven't been negative, but for maybe 6 days or 7 days, but that's because the inactive phase of the MJO was over this region. It would be expected that pressure would rise, but now we're falling again. You can see the trend going back. We have been down as low as 32 and minus 32 and probably lower earlier in the season, but we're back on the negative trend again, which is good. The 30-day average, minus 6.95. We really want to see this down at minus 25 if you're going to be in real legit super El Nino status. I don't know that we're going to get there anytime too soon. The lowest we've been is probably about 10.5, something like that. We're starting to fall back down, but we have a ways to go. The 90-day average, minus 8.74. This needs to be down about minus 15. We were at minus 10 or almost 11 at one point. We're starting, I think this is going to turn some slightly, but again, this is over 3 months. So this is certainly a lagging indicator. In fact, most of all this is other than the daily contribution. Here's the 30-day moving SOI graphed out. You can see back in 2021, 22, there's the zero line there. We're all positive numbers, and then boom, big, massive active phase of the MJO drove the index negative. Then we stalled in July. This was back in, January the whole way through June. We had a bit of a stall. We're hovering around minus 10. I think this is going to start sliding back down, especially the seasonal change is what we need. That really will drive the El Nino thing. In fact, there's been a lot of discussion. Well, in fact, let's go first look at the sea surface temperature forecast. Here's the sea surface temperature forecast from the CFS model for the Nino 3.4 region. It says temperatures have already peaked out at 1.9. I think that's utter and complete folly at this point. As we get into, this is the center of October, so November, that was when it peaked. December is right about here. It says temperatures holding at about 1.75 degrees. I just don't even see that being realistic, and then holding into January and then fading off. That would put us still in strong El Nino status. PDF corrected version, even a more conservative version, says temperatures just falling steadily from here. I'm not even sure why I'm showing this. Well, just to be fair, to show all sides, but the data and what we're seeing just doesn't support what these models are projecting. I'm actually very interested in seeing what the consolidated model suggests as we get, but that doesn't come out till the 20th of the month, so it's going to be a while till we get there. And now to the title of the video. Big changes coming. If you believe a model going out not only a week, but maybe 2 weeks. But there's been a lot of chatter about this on various forums. We've been talking about it here. Everyone's asking, when is rain going to come? Why isn't it coming? What's taking so long? And my typical response is it takes the change in seasons. We're still in the fall. We're not in winter yet. Winter doesn't even start till December 21st or the 20th, I believe. And typically the big El Nino push doesn't start until you get into January, maybe the second week in January. But looking out 180 hours, we see a push of the jet stream, consolidated, no longer split, consolidated. That is one view. Then we go to the GFS model. Again, this is jet stream data going out to, the GFS model actually runs 2 weeks out. I typically don't even show it on the site because it's not believable. But the GFS model and the ECMF model, the two major global models, have both been painting a very similar picture. So I'm just going to run this out here. So we'll go out, let's see, we'll go out, there we are, the 9th, the 10th, we'll go out a week. Wednesday, Thursday, here's where things start. Friday, Saturday, that's where the Stormsurf model kind of ended off. Sunday. And then we go into Monday, look at this, and Tuesday and Wednesday, a very strong jet pushing the whole way over the date line and mostly consolidated, pushing into the Pacific Northwest. This is beginning to look much more like what we'd call classic El Nino, and then the jet flattens out. When it does that, that means there's raging winds in the jet stream. I can't even really tell. That it looks like about 190 knot wind, something there. And we just go out, you see it just poised to rush on shore, holding, mega trough starting digging out on Tuesday. This would be December 26th, the day after Christmas. And you just get the sense that this is, when I think of El Nino, this is exactly the pattern that I think about remembering seeing during bigger El Ninos. So things teasing on the models, but the models have been consistent for over a week now, and it's not one model that's saying it, it's many models. And then we're going to play this game again. This is the GEFS model, the ensemble model. Hundreds and hundreds of different runs of the GFS model with different starting conditions, okay? The same sort of deal. We go out, and it's sort of like an average of a bunch of GFS models. We're at the 15th of December. Then we get into Sunday, the 17th of December, and look at this, just building, rushing across the Pacific, flat and strong, pushing the whole way across, poised to push on into the Central California area by December 26th. Now, do I believe this? I want to believe it. Is it real? Well, of course not. It's a model. But let's talk about this for a second. Everyone's been asking, when's the rain going to start? When's the jet stream going to look like El Nino? When is the Pacific? We've had 3 significant class swells in the Pacific. When is the Pacific really going to go into the El Nino rage machine that we're all kind of used to and looking forward to? And I think the answer is come right about Christmas or the day or two after that. And I think we're going to see about even a week from now, we're going to have really, really good signs of what's coming. But right now, you're getting the early look, the early tease, and it's not one model, it's multiple models suggesting a major change is coming to the North Pacific. And it's the El Nino change we've been expecting to see. And for the folks that live in like Texas and New Mexico and places like that, and Utah, this would be the push that would sweep the whole way across the country if it happens. And notice that it's happening in sync with the building active phase of the MJO. When the active phase is strong during an El Nino year, they constructively interfere or bond with one another and just amplify the jet stream pattern like mad. So this does not actually look unusual at all. It looks exactly like what we'd expect and exactly in the time frame that we would expect it to happen. So it appears, at least on the surface, like El Nino is on the way. So strategy. What are we thinking? Well, right now, surf isn't too big. There's not a whole lot going on. Go do your Christmas shopping. Take care of business. You've got a little window here because as we get deeper into this month, I think things are going to get very busy on the surf scene, and you're going to start seeing major storm and swell after swell. And some of this, with the jet stream getting stronger, it falls south. That opens the swell door for Southern California and folks that are watching down in Central America and even further south than that. I think everyone's going to get an opportunity. The downside of this, of course, is rain, and maybe rain even into Hawaii, cold fronts sweeping over, and sort of a mixed pattern. Same thing for Northern California. It'll really open the window, though, for Southern California. And then, of course, the ski resorts dying for snow. They might get their due finally. So, I think we have good news to say, but I don't want to jinx it. I'm not going to say it's coming. I'm just saying the models are teasing, but I think everyone needs to know about it. It could change. We'll have to find out next week. All right, if you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, click the icon down there in the bottom and you can sign up. If you want to make a donation, you're welcome to. Not required, but always appreciated. And other than that, thank you for watching. If you have comments or questions, be sure to write them up down below. We try to answer them as quickly as possible. And other than that, we're going to do this next week, same time, same channel. A lot of good stuff is coming, so we'll see you then. Thanks for watching.